Hey everybody, what's going on, and welcome to Guns N' Roses Central. And today I want to talk about why bands hated opening for Guns N' Roses, at least back in the day. So a lot of people think probably Faith No More is the first band that comes to mind, but there was a number of other bands, even before Faith No More, that didn't want to open for Guns N' Roses. And this dates back all the way to 1988. So Guns N' Roses were playing down under in Australia, and there was a band that probably most people have never heard of because they never went anywhere, but they were called Kings of the Sun. And this was a band that basically knocked Guns N' Roses in the newspaper interview before they went on stage with the band. And then during the show, Axl got wind of it and got pissed off and basically slammed them during the set. Here's a story of that. This one dates back to 1988, December of 1988. So Guns N' Roses were in Australia for the first time. They were promoting Appetite for Destruction, and they were playing a couple shows in the land down under. Now, one of the bands that was opening for Guns N' Roses was a band called Kings of the Sun. Now, they had opened three shows for Guns N' Roses on December 14th, 15th, as well as the 17th. Now, just before the show, the band Kings of the Sun did a newspaper interview where they sort of threw some shade at Guns N' Roses. They basically said that Guns N' Roses were ripping off Rose Tattoo, and how Guns N' Roses even ripped them off by covering one of their songs on GNR Lies. And of course, on their debut release, Live Like a Suicide. So in the interview, here's what they had to say. So that newspaper article I showed you was the actual article where they gave the interview slamming Guns N' Roses. So during the interview, one of the band members named Jeffrey announces that Australia has produced some of the greatest bands in the world, and it's also destroyed some of the greatest bands in the world. Rose Tattoo should have been one of the biggest. He also said, and you go over to LA, says Clifford, and you see Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue doing the whole tattoo business, ripping them off completely. They, referring to Guns N' Roses, even do one of their songs in their set, Nice Boys Don't Play Rock and Roll. So before the December 17th gig, Axl got his hands on the newspaper article and took offense to the remark they made directed towards Guns N' Roses, to the point that Axl pulled the plug on the Kings of the Sun and basically had them pulled off stage only 20 minutes into their set. Here's what Axl had to say during the concert.
Before we get started, I want to, we read this article backstage with this band, and it wasn't too favorable in some of their opinions, and so I'd like to publicly address that. I'd like to apologize for having a puny-ass faggot band like Kings of the Sun open the fucking show. Sorry we gave them an opportunity. I ain't no fucking Rose Tattoo ripoff. They're just one of my favorite fucking bands, that's all. We put a Rose Tattoo song on our record because we wanted people in America to listen to some bitchin' Australian bands, that's all. Sorry I gave you guys, an opening slot on our fucking thing. Anyway, this is a song, if you think it's so bad, then you fucking prove it. Here's a song called It's So Easy.
Now fast forward 4 years later, and Guns N' Roses had the band Faith No More open for them a number of dates with Metallica and without Metallica when they were in Europe. And this was kind of a weird relationship. Like, the members of Guns N' Roses loved Faith No More, but the guys with Faith No More didn't really like touring with Guns just because they saw how absurd everything was. So during the tour, Faith No More's keyboardist Roddy Bottum described the scene backstage as excess, excess, and more excess. And he said there were more strippers than road crew. The band was eventually reprimanded for laughing about the absurdity of touring environment in the press. And his band were told that we'd have to apologize to Axl or leave the tour. So Faith No More made an attempt to explain where they were coming from. But in their words, they said, I think it went over his head because as a sort of peace offering, he brought us to a trailer backstage where two naked women, strippers, were having sex with one another. So what was the article that Faith No More did in the press that caused a lot of outrage by Axl and the Guns N' Roses camp? So they gave an interview to Melody Maker. It came out in August of 92, and it said some really disparaging things about Guns N' Roses. In fact, there was little blurbs that they had, or sections that talked about the certain interview topics, and one of them was that Axl's going bald. So one of the band members said, he really is. They told the story of how Guns N' Roses were playing one night, and Duff walks up to Axl and pats him on the head like a loving comrade type thing, and Axl Rose immediately brings the show to a halt, and this is in front of 80,000 people, and he basically screams, "Don't ever touch my head again, mother effer," and Duff just walked away wounded. We found out later that it was because he was going bald, and he's worried that if you touch his hair, it will fall out. Every follicle counts. He came up to me the other night and said, "Hey man, your song really helped me through some really heavy shit in my life." I said, "Really?" I asked, "What song is that?" He said, "Midlife Crisis." What kind of shit, I asked. He looked at the ground for about an hour and then shook his head and said, just a lot of shit, man. I tell you, I was biting my lips so hard trying not to lose it. We've given up trying to be quiet about their stupid games. It's got to come out somewhere. And for a while, we were a little cautious of saying anything, but we were uncomfortable with that. Did you want to know about the Warren Beatty thing? So they go on to say that at the last show of the European tour, Axel Psychic, who has her own bodyguard, went out and blessed his microphone and blessed the stage. So Roddy said, I'd have Slash in a minute. Trouble is, I think he'd nod off and be a bit dozy. I think he'd be very romantic, take me out for a nice dinner and pay for my cab back to my hotel and say, see you tomorrow. Actually, I'm being sarcastic. He's not that type at all. Who is? Actually, I kind of look like Chris Cross. So there was other interviews that Mike Patton gave where he basically said, it's a total spectacle, a sick circus, and we're not even involved. We're just watching it. Guns N' Roses are the circus. It's amazing. It's just a lot of money and way too much time to spend it in. Now, you guys may say, well, Sid, you guys are only looking at the negative. Weren't there any bands who toured with Guns N' Roses who had positive things to say during those years? And there were, in fact, acts who had positive things to say, including, their friends from Blind Melon. But probably one act who you guys may not remember who toured for Guns N' Roses or opened for them was Brian May's band. So after Freddie had passed away, Brian May released a solo record. And he opened for Guns N' Roses a lot at the Skin and Bones tour. And here's what he had to say about opening for the band.
Very well, thank you.
Hey, I'm psyched that you're coming, you and Guns N' Roses. I was wondering, how did you get the invitation to play for Guns N' Roses?
It's funny, it's like most of the best things in life, it happened by accident, really. I had the intention to come here somehow, and I was looking for, I thought it would be good to do a support spot because I would get to a lot of people in a short time, And if I'd had the choice, I would have said I would like to do it with Guns N' Roses, but it just happened that we were talking to their agent, and he said, well, I need someone to open for him on this leg of the tour. Are you interested? And I said, yep, please.
How long have you known those guys, Slash and Axel and those guys, Brian?
Quite a while now. I have huge respect for them, I really do. I think, I won't have anything said against those guys.
No way.
I've known, I guess I talked to Axel first because he was very much concerned with Freddie, and he knew that Freddie was ailing before anyone else did. And I had a lot of conversations with him because Axel was trying to find some way of curing him, as we all were. And he was great about that. So we sort of went from there, and then they did the tribute to Freddie, as you know, which was great. And they were totally professional, totally wonderful at that. And then I sort of, at that point, I got to know the guys well, and Slash came down and jammed at the rehearsals, and I was very taken with that. He's really a great player. There's no doubt about it, great passion, great inventiveness. He plays tunes too, as a lot of people don't these days.
He takes chances, and that's another.
Absolutely, he's a dangerous player, as as the band is dangerous, which is great.
All right.
Now, more recently, there's been several bands who have opened for Guns N' Roses and really haven't had a great experience. And one of those was Papa Roach, and of course the other one was the Eagles of Death Metal, both of which who opened for Guns N' Roses back in 2006. So Papa Roach gave an interview back in 2018 where they revealed that they were basically threatened by Guns N' Roses management and that Axl Rose wasn't too happy. So the interviewer mentioned that during the peak of Dick Axl, as he called it, Papa Roach said Axl wasn't necessarily a dick to them, but they did not enjoy his shenanigans on tour.
The last time he was here was 22 with Red Hot Chili Peppers. I didn't realize as well, you guys actually toured with Guns N' Roses in 2006, was it?
Yeah.
And this is during the peak of Dick Axl, right?
Yeah.
How? Be honest. Now I want to be. Was he Dick Axl, or was that all just fabrication?
Well, I mean, he was. We didn't.
He
wasn't a dick to. He wasn't a dick to us. Honestly, he was never around. But in typical Axl Rose fashion, it was like we were scheduled to go on a certain time every night. Of course, that time would change 3 to 4 times within that night. You're supposed to go on at 8:30. Then it would be like, nope, you're going on at 9. Oh, now you're going at 9:30. Oh, Axel's not here yet. Can you go on at 10 and
go
play
on
a little
again?
bit? Play a little bit longer than you're contracted for. And we're like, after a while, we're just like, no.
Yeah,
it's just
fuck this. We're just now we're gonna go on stage. Well, we're supposed to go on stage, and we'll finish what we're supposed to.
They even threatened us to kick us off the tour at one point because of something. He canceled the show at the very last minute, and the press caught us outside and asked us why the show got canceled, and we said something like, I don't know, if it was up to us, we would still play, sorry, we'll come back.
Yeah, he got all pissed. Yeah, they were like, didn't they want us to write like an apology letter or some shit?
Yeah, they want us to apologize. We're like, no. They're like,
cool.
we're going to
You
kick you
wanna
off
kick
the
us
tour, and we're like, okay, like we're fucking.
Like,
this.
Is this like the manager, or is this like Axel wearing a hat just going like,
Guns N'
Axel looks the
Roses.
bullshit?
They look like the Village People, you know what I mean? And it was like, it didn't really matter, but it was cool. We got to play Madison Square Garden. That was like the big thing. Yeah. But when we toured here with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, that was a dream come true. Yeah, because Red Hot Chili Peppers for us was a band that, like, we grew up, listening to, and were super inspired just by their freaky, styly, ways. And it was like, there was a moment, I think, when I was watching one show from the side of the stage, and like I got teary eyed because I was just in like, just sitting there, just like watching the Chili Peppers. It was like a band that pretty much, I remember when Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out. That's pretty much how I taught myself how to play guitar and bass. Like, I learned that whole record note for note, and that's what kind of kickstarted my obsession with funk and punk and all
Was
that
they
stuff.
a band that you got to hang out with, like, as opposed to like?
We got to hang out with Chad.
A little bit.
But they say you never want to meet your heroes, right?
Yeah, no, I did. I mean, like, I had a couple conversations with Flea, but
Now, we can't talk about bands who didn't have a good experience opening for Guns N' Roses without talking about the Eagles of Death Metal. Jesse Hughes has kind of become popular because Axl Rose fired the band basically from their first gig opening for Guns N' Roses. So they were playing the Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland back in 2006. The crowd had a really poor reaction to the Eagles of Death Metal, as they probably should have. And Axl Rose came out and called them the Pigeons of Shit Metal and basically fired them off the tour. So they were no longer opening for Guns N' Roses. But Jesse Hughes revealed that he actually negotiated their fees up front and basically got paid up front because he was worried that Axl, being volatile as he is, would cancel some gigs, or he wouldn't show up, or worse yet, the band would get fired. But he's always taken little jabs at Axl over the years. So that does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and go check us out at gnrcentral.com for the latest Guns N' Roses news. Take care.
Hey, this is Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses, and you're watching GNR Central. Yeah!